What's going on, everybody? So we just got Tangtang released, and as you could probably tell from the lack of videos that have been posted on YouTube, nobody had early access to this character, and I think that might be the norm going forward for Endfield. As a result, some of you guys may be in the dark about what to do with Tangtang and like specifically where she fits rotation wise, what set you should be using, etc. So in today's video, I'm going to try to clear that up. Keep in mind this is all early information, but I think I have a pretty good grasp on what this character is supposed to do and where she fits best. So with all that being said, my name is Braxophone. You can call me Brax. Let's get into it. So Soup here is actually a very cool character. She can be played for her personal damage, or she can be played as a support.
Basically what I meant to say here is that she can be played as a DPS or a sub DPS, but I don't know what the fuck is going on.
Either way, she actually is a very versatile character that has a lot of different ways you can play her, and I think that makes her really fun. Now I am going to show you rotations and things, but first I do want to kind of talk about teams that you can play her in. The one that I recommend the most right now is Last Right, just because Last Right teams were kind of missing someone that could help apply that cryo and some more art susceptibilities, and Tangtang's able to do that very frequently. You can also play Perlica for some electrification, and of course Jahi's just good with every single cryo team. But before I go into kind of the details of the entire team, let me show you what she does, or just I'll go over really quickly because there's a lot of words. So Tangtang's entire kit revolves around creating whirlpools and water spouts, and essentially what these are is a buffing and debuffing mechanism that will constantly spin around and also dish out some damage. So what you're going to do is create whirlpools by using different parts of her kit and turn them into water spouts to apply an art susceptibility and return some SP to her, as well as dish out some damage. All of these things kind of come together for that. Now, one cool thing about Tangtang is that her skill is able to apply cryo infliction, and this is actually a pretty rare thing. Jahi's does, but it is delayed. Estella also does, but the rest of her kit can mess you up if you don't use it correctly. So it's nice to have a character that feels like they're supposed to fit cryo teams, not some kind of pseudo-physical team, and also consistently apply cryo infliction. I also forgot to mention the art susceptibility is increased based on the amount of water spouts you have. So if you have 3 water spouts, you actually get a 10% art susceptibility, which is very, very strong. Now, Tangtang's combo will actually trigger whenever you apply a cryo infliction or do an arts burst, which is just stacking to the same arts on top of each other. And it has a 13-second cooldown. It's not the fastest in the world, but it's also not that slow. And you will be making plenty use of this, especially because it's going to create whirlpools, which you're going to want to stack on to your skill or ultimate uses. Now, the ultimate one, a lot of people might not actually know about this, but essentially her ultimate is also able to create water spouts, but you have to have her passive unlocked. So I'll read her ultimate and then I'll get into it. Essentially, her ultimate is going to freeze enemies in place. It's been described to me as a time stop, but it's not stopping the timer, it's stopping the enemies. So don't get too excited, right? But the cool thing is it's going to dish out a ton of damage, but you also have an opportunity to end the Olden Stare early by using a dive attack. If you don't know what a dive attack is, it's basically where you just jump and do a basic attack. It's like a plunge attack in like some of the other games you may be used to, and it's going to end her ult early and make a rogue wave crash down earlier, which if you have her passive will actually allow you to proc the same thing that her skill does, which is creating the water spouts. So essentially you'll just create water spouts with her ultimate instead of her skill. This means that if there are teams or rotations where you don't use her skill, you can still get the benefits of her water spouts. Additionally, they also get a damage increase, and it's pretty massive. Now, she also does have some debuffing capabilities. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think this is that big of a deal. It can be kind of helpful in boss fights. Essentially, it's just going to make it so operators get a movement speed buff and enemies get slowed down. I think the movement speed buff will be nice for like trying to catch up with bosses and things like that, but I don't think it's that significant. But basically, her whole goal is you want to stack up the whirlpools. The easiest way to do that is to use her combo skill. Also, using her skill will automatically give you 1 water spout. So you technically only need to use 2 combo skills between casting her ultimate or skill to be able to get the full 3 water spouts for the full art susceptibility. So keep that in mind. It's really easy to get her combo trigger because you can actually apply cryo infliction with Last Right's basic combo and with Jahi as well. So there are lots of ways to activate this, lots of ways to get that art susceptibility. And overall, her personal damage contribution is also pretty good. And on top of that, with her skill, you actually get SP returned as well. So only good things for her. It doesn't feel like there's too many caveats. She just seems to be a pretty functional character in basically every cryo team. Now, I do want to kind of go over weapons and gear as well. before I kind of go over the rotation and how you play her. The reason being that the bonuses from the weapons and the gear are very important for Arknight's Endfield compared to some of the other gacha games we have on the market. So real quick, I did get her signature weapon. The reason I got her signature is because it is very good for the cryo team. So essentially it's going to make it so when she applies cryo infliction, she gets a huge cryo damage dealt bonus, which is nice, but mostly when her skill or ultimate applies art susceptibility, which is going to do via the water spouts, enemies also get an extra arts damage taken increase, which is huge when you account for all of the other buffs we're going to be getting. As for gear, there's kind of like 2 different gear setups you can run, but this is the one that I recommend. It's going to be the Bone Crusher Heavy Armor Tier 2. This is the new armor. This just has agility and strength, which are her main 2 stats, and it has a cryo electro damage bonus, so it's going to be the best off piece for her. That's going to give her some extra damage. But mostly you just want to make sure that you have Shiranite. Now, the thing is with Shiranite is that you're only getting value to her secondary stat, but the reason you actually want to run it is for ult gain efficiency. Now, I actually don't have these fully artificed because resources on my main account are scarce. By the end game, you should have these fully artificed because that's going to make it very easy to consistently get her ult back. And plus, you should just have like artifice Shiranite sets for the ult gain efficiency. It's just going to make it easier for every single character you have. But mostly we want the 3-piece effect. So you only need one of these on a team, but after she applies Amp, Protected, Susceptibility, or Weakened, she's able to do Susceptibility. Your entire team gets 16% more damage dealt, which is huge. So playing her this way, the Shiranite set's going to give you 16% more damage dealt for your team, 10% art susceptibility at talent level 9. It might even go up higher than that. And on top of that, another 9.6% arts damage taken at level 1 copy of her weapon. Now for other weapons, if you guys are interested, we do have Home Longing, which is going to be the battle pass weapon. So if you do manage to get that one, it can be pretty solid for her because at R9, it even beats out Wedge and Clannable R9, which is max copies, max essence. It is going to be a little hard to get max copies, but you can do it if you're willing to wait another patch. Either way, it's really good. If you don't have that or you don't plan on getting it, you can also use Clannable or Wedge, and those are okay options. But beyond that, I don't really recommend going much further. I do think it's pretty easy to get some standard 6 stars in this game compared to some of the other gachas I've played, so you should at least have some decent options for her. All right, so I've yapped long enough. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how she actually plays, and after that, I'll go over what her team setup was, some other teammate options, and some other gearing options for her. All right, good morning, guys. I'm going to be going over Soup Soup's rotation. It is actually very easy and loopable. However, this will just be covering Last Right, but Yvonne can be played fairly similarly. So first off, when you get on the field, you're going to want to use Jaihe's skill and Last Right's skill as well. This is to make sure that you have Cryo Infliction pretty quickly, with Jaihe's coming up later and Last Right's right away. You're going to use your combo up to a Final Strike with Last Right to proc her skill. Then you're going to follow it up with a Perlica combo and a Soup Soup combo skill. That's going to give Soup Soup another Whirlpool stack. Then you're going to want to use Last Right's basic sequence again with another skill added before the final strike into Jaihe's combo skill, Last Right's combo skill, and Jaihe's skill once again afterwards. Then you're going to want to use Last Right basics into Final Strike with a skill also before you hit that final strike, Soup Soup's combo skill, Soup Soup's ultimate into a dive basic attack. That should net you 3 water spouts off the bat or the maximum art susceptibility on enemies, and of course high damage. Then you're going to want to make sure that you can skill with Last Right before her next final strike and do that, which will also proc Jaihe and Perlica's combo skill. And right after Perlica's combo, you'll want to use Jaihe and Perlica's ultimates into Last Right's combo skill into Last Right's ultimate. Then after that, you can just repeat the process. This is of course assuming that you have enough ult gain on Soup Soup to be able to actually repeat her ult that frequently, but you should be able to so long as you have the Shiranite set and you've artificed the gear a little bit. Keep in mind though, this rotation is for content where you don't actually start with your ultimates, and if you're going to do something like try and speed run a boss, a DPS build would actually be better and the rotation would vary slightly. For example, if you're fighting against a boss and you start with all of your ultimate energy, you can do a shortened rotation where so long as you get 2 Tangtang combo skills, you're able to do something like freeze the boss with Tangtang's ultimate before they use a phase transition and get the maximum amount of water spouts and a ton of damage out at the same time. So what is this alternate build that I've been talking about? Well, essentially the alternate build is going to be not utilizing Shiranite because you don't need the energy regen because you would be starting with your ultimate energy and clearing in 1 rotation. Instead, in this setup, you would use the Bone Crusher Heavy Armor 2, the Bone Crusher Wristband Tier 1, and 2 of these Bone Crusher Masks 2. This is going to give you the full 3-piece Bone Crusher set, which is going to give you more attack, and she'll get 2 combo skill casts, which are going to make it so next battle skill damage dealt is going to be increased. This actually affects the amount of damage you get from the water spouts out of your dive attacks, so it is pretty significant. Either way, running the double mask setup is going to be the best build for DPS Tangtang, and this doesn't even matter if you're using her on field or off field. If you're trying to 1 rotation content, this is the way to go, but if you're doing something like Umbral Monument, then you do want to go with the 2 heavy armor and the rest being the Shiranite set to buff your main DPS characters, or to just consistently have the damage over multiple rotations. Now, I want to add a note about main DPS Tangtang, I actually think she's really fun to play on field, and she can be very, very strong in that setup. Now, me personally, I don't have as much experience playing her on field because the main thing that she would be used on field for would be speedrun content. And in something like Umbral Monument, while she works just fine and there's not really any issues with it, the main DPS build of Tangtang does actually get gimped a little bit by the fact that she won't have significant energy regen. So you can play her on field if you would like. I just prefer not playing her on field for Umbral because her damage will be kind of gimped by running the Sheer Knight set, and you're absolutely going to want to do that if you want to do consistent rotations. But yeah, she's super fun. I do really enjoy playing her on field. I think that also her attack animation with the sort of like after images happening here, super sick. I love that so much. So let's talk teams. Oh, dude, she's so cute. Actually, this is adorable. Now, the main team that I showcased today was Last Ride, Tangtang, Perlica, and Xiaohe. Now, there's a couple reasons for this. Xiaohe's able to consistently apply cryo every 2 basic attack combo rotations, and Last Ride is also able to apply cryo every 1 basically final strike that she has with her skill active. Tangtang just needs cryo to be afflicted to proc her combo skill, and you can do this twice between every single ultimate. The value of Perlica, though, is actually interesting. I think a lot of people are finally coming around to Perlica, which I'm really happy about, because in the beta I was saying this character is super busted and everyone's eyes are finally opened to the value of electrification. Now, Perlica's combo skill is incredibly easy to proc. It is so easy. You just need to do a final strike on an enemy. That's it. It does have a 20-second cooldown. However, you're able to apply electrification. And electrification basically increases the amount of arts damage that enemies take based on how many stacks are used to apply it. Now, Perlica does just force electrification, which means that there are like no stacks really that go into it. It's just the default like 1 stack electrification. But with that said, it's going to increase damage dealt for about 5 seconds, which is very valuable if you're able to burst out everything all at once. So like Xiaohe's ultimate to increase things. Perlica's ultimate also does a big chunk of damage and doesn't apply anything, so it won't mess with the cryo inflictions. And then by using all of the ultimates or the combo skills all in tandem with like Last Rite, as shown in the rotation before, you will see a really big damage as a result. Now, if you don't want to play Perlica, or if you don't have her built, you can also play Ardelia. Ardelia is a very good unit for her corrosion and for the weapons that she's able to wield, which will also help inflict more arts damage taken on enemies after consuming corrosion, which, you know, she's able to do. And overall, she does provide a lot of value for your team. This one's also really good specifically for doing 1 rotations, which you can use DPS setup on Tangtang for. Now, I did just throw Tangtang in an Yvonne team over Alesh, and it works pretty dang well because Tangtang can apply cryo with her skill. The rotation is a little bit different, but functionally it still plays the same. You build up whirlpools, you activate water spouts, you burst, and that's that. The Gilberta pick is really good for content where you have multiple enemies and you want to group them all up because Yvonne doesn't have a lot of AoE damage. So the value here would be that you can group everything up all together for Yvonne's bombs and for all of Tangtang's extra explosive damage. However, you can also just play Perlica here, and this ends up also being good as well. And then lastly, you can also just switch Tangtang into the open main DPS slot. There is honestly still a lot to test with this, you guys. I wanted to get you guys the preliminary info so that way you guys could start building her and playing her, but I will say there is probably going to be a lot more info that comes out over time. There are so many things to test in this game. This gacha game has the most considerations for team building and gameplay of any gacha game that I have played personally, and it's just a lot. So, oh, and one other thing I forgot to mention. If you just need cryo afflictions for like a main DPS setup, or if you're playing with Yvonne or something like that, you can also just use Estella, and she would basically just be a skill bot because she can apply cryo infliction with that. I wouldn't really recommend using anything else in here, but just specifically the cryo infliction could be really nice because it's on her skill. So, and regardless of what teams you're playing, I would recommend getting a high intellect build with Xiaohe. This is on my main account, and my resources are kind of spread thin, so I haven't been able to max artifice everything, but essentially the best build for Xiaohe here would just be dumping everything into intellect here. Max intellect, you get ult gain efficiency on the new piece, the Redeemer armor. This one you will need to get your stock place upgraded for to buy the Redeemer armor blueprint. But then other than that, you have the Sheer Knight gloves for ult gain efficiency, intellect boost, secondary attribute, intellect boost, secondary attribute. And that's basically going to just massively increase her intellect, which is going to affect her buffs and the amount of amp that you're going to be getting. For Perlica, I highly recommend playing her on the Pulsar Lab set, which is going to increase the amount of electric damage she does, which isn't that significant, except for when you use her ultimate, it's going to make it hit way harder. And it also gives her arts intensity too, which is kind of cool, but mostly it also just matches her her main stats here. So overall, it is kind of one of the better options. She doesn't really have issues with energy, which is nice. And I did just give her Sheer Knight gloves just so she has a little bit of that, but it's not going to be as significant as some other characters that want like full ult gain efficiency. She just needs this one. And you do want to make sure that you're artificing all the ones that have ult gain efficiency, so that way you get the max amount, so that way there's no discrepancies in any of the rotations. Lastly, for last right, I gave her the Aether Tech plating, which has her main stats and a bonus against staggered enemies, but then also the Tidal Surge set, which is going to increase skill damage, which procs every single time she uses her basic combo. And after she applies her second stack of Arts Infliction, she'll get an increase to her cryo damage dealt, which is Arts damage dealt, but it affects all the elemental damages, so highly recommend that. Now, I will just say real quick for Ardelia, if you choose to build her with Tangtang, as mentioned before, a DPS Tangtang build is going to be what you would use Ardelia with, and you would use it in content where you start with all of your ultimate energy ready. In that case, you would not want to run Knight on Tangtang because she's going to be a main DPS, and you can just run Knight on Ardelia. Now, if you guys want a reference for what I've been looking at and the math that I use for my videos, this is the sheet that I'm referencing. This is from my buddies Low Priority and Catalyst Online. Absolutely fantastic theory crafters, and they've been working with me for a very long time. Catalyst has been massively helpful and even recorded some of that footage that you guys saw earlier to make sure it was all done right. Absolutely fantastic stand-up dudes. Here's the Tangtang DPS build for 81k, and then you have the Knight build, which is 75k, but the DPS build doesn't loop perfectly because of the energy thing. So you will do more DPS off the bat with Bone Crusher, but you won't be able to repeat it. So it's good for bursting down bosses, not so much for Umbral Monument. Here are her potential gains. To be honest, potentials in Arknight's Endfield aren't like super significant gains in general, but if you want a reference for how much each one's going to add, I wasn't planning on really going in depth on these because most of my viewers aren't spending, but I did want to mention that reference. And then you also have the weapon chart here, so this is going to be a good reference for like what weapons you should be building, etc., etc. All of this should be up on datafield.cc later, so if you guys do want a good reference for characters and like how much damage their teams do and things like that, definitely check this out. You can find some pretty cool stuff. With that being said, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was kind of helpful to you guys. I think that all of my videos for Endfield, like character guides and stuff, are probably going to be more like this format in the future, because realistically, I don't have enough time to make any of my like crazy Insido style guides, but also I feel like these characters have so much to them. It's really hard to go into every single possible detail without just having a conversation like this where I can just explain every single thing. So if you guys enjoyed, make sure to like the video, and thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.